and I'll go with selecting the app service plan is critical. So go ahead and select that and go with review and create. So once I have done a review and create, I'll be good. I'll just go ahead and create the app. Okay. So it takes a few minutes or like a few seconds to get it up and ready. Yeah. So here, if you see here, let me just go back. So this is one of the other projects that I had done. Let me just quickly finish this. And runtime stack. So while it is created, yes. So it just takes a few seconds to get created. So while this is getting created, I'll show you one of the demos that I already have. So this is one of the other apps that I had created. You will get a similar one when you also go ahead and deploy it. This is the Lighthouse website that I had created. You can see that in the overview pane, I'm getting a URL here. This URL is a default URL which comes. Now, what I can do is when I browse this particular URL, I'll get a page telling that you're ready to upload your website or your website is ready. So now let's say, yeah, this one which I just created is already ready. So this is the demo one that I created, demo Lighthouse. Yeah, so this is the URL. Let me just go ahead and click that. You can see that web app is running and it's waiting for your content here. Now, as simple as this is like just creating a web application. Now you can put a lot of your code, your content on this site. Now I'll give you another trick. So this is just using one service, right? This is just using your web app. Now how I can make use of another service. So let's say,
Payal,
yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you in between. I'm so sorry, but
sure,
actually
sure.
there was some technical glitch because of which recording didn't get started, right?
Okay.
Can we request you maybe the demo where you started from, only that portion, if you can maybe just do it again, so when we share the recording with the students, they have the complete recording with them. I'm so sorry I have to take you through this, but there was some technical glitch because of which the recording didn't happen.
Sure, sure. So you want me to start off from where we are creating our app? Is that right?
I think where you actually started your actual demo from, that how do they can get, like how they can get started by creating their project, maybe from that step if we could cover.
Okay, okay, cool, cool.
I'm so sorry again for taking you through that.
Hey, no problem at all. I hope students will get a quick recap as well, right? Maybe I can ask the students also to help me
Oh,
along with this step.
that's a good idea. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you.
Sure, sure. No problem. So, just again, for the sake of the recording, I'll just do a quick recap and let's see if you all are following with me or not. So this page, which I was talking to you about earlier, is like a three-tier application, right? So this is a three-tier application, or you can say a tier structure, wherein we have a presentation layer or a web server. That's what we talk about, an application layer and a database. Okay, so these three form your three basic tiers of any application. Now, generally users just think of it maybe like an e-commerce website, right? So when you log into the portal or the site, you click or you interact with all the icons or different components, right? So at the back end, there is an application running, and whatever you select or whatever you add gets added to a database, right? Some database will be there. I think all of us can at least connect to this much, right? So similarly, this is a very simple structure. I can say this is an oversimplified structure of all the applications that we are looking at. But you can make use of this as your base to build on more complex projects. Now, as FRT, we spoke about building your projects with at least minimum of 2 Azure services, right? So what I will do, and my colleagues Sunil and Alok, they will also share some tips and tricks on how you can, build or give you the basic structure of these applications or different applications, and then you can build more complex projects if needed. Okay. So in my session or in my portion, what I am going to talk about is how we can make use of your app services. Right. So what is an app service? Now, app service is nothing but when you deploy any website, right? That website that you see, right? Azure Portal or different websites that you see, that particular piece is your app service now. Now, when you have that app service, you don't just create an app service. You should have an app service plan as well. Now, what is this app service plan, or why do you need an app service plan? Right? See, just think of it like when you purchase a phone subscription or any type of subscription, you need to have a plan, right, which will tell you what are the capabilities, what are the features, be it for any OTT sites or any type of mobile phone devices or anything that you buy. You have a subscription from your mobile provider. Similarly, when you deploy a website, you need an app service plan also. Now, there are various app service plans based on what is your requirement. As a student, as part of the FRT, if you're using the $100 student credit being given, I would recommend that you use the free plan there, because that is sufficient for us to complete our project. But if you think about from industry standpoint, definitely there are different premium and shared, isolated, and so on plans. But for our purpose, just think of using the free service plan there that you will be deploying your websites with. Okay, so now before I show the demo, and I know some of us have already seen it, but okay, for the demo purpose, what I'll do is I will just create a simple app where I'm going to show you how to associate a app service plan and an app service. Okay, now let's go to our portal. So as part of FRT, all of you would have gotten access to the Azure portal. I'll quickly show the portal as well. So this would be your portal. Now in this, you can either search for app services, right? You can either search for app services, or what you can do is you can create, or you can go to create a resource, this particular option, create a resource, and select the web app there. Okay, you can select a web app there. Now let's say if I select app services, I want to create a resource. Okay, now when I'm selecting this create a web app, you can see that there are certain options which are marked with a red asterisk. Now, this red asterisk is nothing but the compulsory details that is needed when you're starting your deployment. Now, you can see there's something mentioned as subscription. Now, as part of FRT, you would have received the student subscription of $100, right? $100 credit. So that is the one that you're going to mention here, because subscription is nothing but whatever services you're using, they'll have to be billed, right? So for billing purposes, we associated with subscription. So from our end, whenever you're creating any resource, just associate it with a subscription. After that, you need to associate a resource group. Now, what is a resource group? So whenever you have any resource created, right, in Azure, be it anything, web services or any SQL database, anything, all these have to be within a container, or they have to be within a group called as a resource group. So in Azure, whenever you create any resource, by resource, I mean all these services, web apps, be it your container, virtual machines, anything, all these are resources. So whenever you're creating those, you have to associate it with a resource group. Okay. Now, when I am going to create a resource group, I can create a new resource group as well, right? Or I can use a existing one as well. Let me just create a new one. It's very simple. Just go ahead and create a resource group, and then I have to give a web app service name. So I'm just giving it as Lighthouse demo. Um, Okay, you have to make sure that this particular name that you're giving, right? The name for the web app service, it has to be a unique one. Just try it with a combination, because otherwise, if it is not a unique one, it will not select it. Like you saw, when I just gave Lighthouse hyphen demo, it gave it that this particular name is not available. So it will come with a domain Azure websites. Now I will have to select what is the runtime stack. Now I have a question. Can I only select Windows related ones like ASP.NET, .NET, or can I have even Linux-based languages available, runtime stack? Can I also take a Linux-based one? Yes, no? On the chat, you can reply on the chat as well. Yes, no? So when you select a particular language, right? So if I select a runtime stack, right? So if I can see the answers are yes, you can select whichever language you can take. Yeah, you can take a Linux one also or a Windows one also. So you see, .NET is going to be a Windows platform. So you can see that it's automatically selecting a Windows one. Now, what I can try doing is when I have selected the runtime stack, I have to give the region. So now region is very important in Azure because this is the location, geographical location where your application's data is going to get stored. Okay, so you need to mention that compulsorily. Whatever region you're selecting, right, at times that also contributes to your cost as well, and what type of runtimes are available. So just make a note of that. So I'll just go to this, just checking if I have that. Yes. So now when I have selected this region, I have to make sure that I select a app service plan. So I was talking to you about the app service plan, right? Make sure you select the free one because for our lab purpose or our project purpose, the free one should be sufficient. So go ahead and select the free one. So you can see that free F1. There are a lot of pricing plans. You can explore this using the different pricing plans as well. Once this is done, just go ahead and do review and create. Right, so this will create or it will populate the resource. So while we wait for it, I already have certain created app services already, so I can show you that. This is validating. So once it is validated it that I'm eligible to create a resource, I'll have to just click again on create and this app service will get created. Now I already have certain pre-prepared ones, so let me just show those as well. So this is the one that we were working with earlier. So once the app service has got deployed, you will get this URL here, right? You get this URL here. If you click on this overview, you get the URL. Just click on this URL and you can see that the web app is running. So within few clicks, we have a website up and running. So you can upload any of your code, make it as, upload, make any changes to this particular website and so on. So within few minutes, we were able to get our web app running. Now, to make sure that you're falling into the criteria of making use of two services, currently I just use one service because this is just a web app. I haven't made use of any other service, right? So I can give you another suggestion. What you can do is when you look at this demo, right? There are a lot of settings and deployment options here. So if you scroll down, there is something called as deployment tools. Right, so there's something called as deployment tools. In that, you have something called as an app service editor. So just click on this app service editor. Let me open the app service editor. It's taking a few minutes, seconds. Okay. So this app service editor gives you the HTML view or the view of that particular web page. So you can modify that web page as well. So currently you see this is the default one that got populated when I selected .NET 7. Now if I want to maybe change something on this particular website. So what I can do is I can easily go to this app editor and I can change few of the data here. So let's say if I don't want this particular image to be there, I want to change some of the data. I can make that very easily, right? So what I have done is, let's say this is the nothing but this is something like an image source, right? What I can do is I can replace this image source with some other image source. Now in the next demo, Sunil will show you how to, my colleague Sunil will show you how we can add a storage account, but I can quickly show you how I can incorporate it with the web services as well. So let me just show that. I'll just take a few more minutes to show it. So this is one of the storage accounts. So I already have a storage account that I have created and I have uploaded a picture there. Okay, so I'll quickly show this because Sunil will show it in detail. I'll just show this one. This is the file that I have uploaded. Now I want to make use of this particular file in my website. So what I can do is I can just edit few of the image source. Let's say this was the image source here and I can just give this. Okay. And let's say this text file, this particular text, I want to just change it, right? To project Lighthouse. Okay. And maybe I want to see a preview of this, right? I want to see a preview. There is a small icon here. Okay, let me show you. So here you can see that it's showing the project Lighthouse and it is showing the image here. Let me just go back. Yeah. So something similar we can try doing. So I have modified another lab here. Let me show you here. So this was similar session only. I have created it. I have modified the editor file here. So where do I have to go? I'll have to go to this deployment tools under that app service editor, right? So if I click on this app service editor, I have made few modifications in this particular file, the URL and the image thing, right? So let's say after making the modification, you see here, if I want to browse, how does it look like? All that I need to do is after the modifications, I'll click on this URL. You see that it comes up like this, Project Lighthouse with the image that I desire, right? So what I did was, instead of I used the basic framework which was available with web app, and I associated a storage account. I created a storage account, used a picture uploaded to that storage account for my website. So I'm meeting up the criteria for using two services there. One is your storage account. Using the blob storage, I have uploaded a picture and uploaded it on my website. Right? I'll take a pause here. Let me know if you have any queries so far on the discussion that we had. Good?
And students, you have to raise your hand in case if you have a question. We'll call out your name. You can unmute yourself and you can then ask your question. So just
Yeah.
raise your question if you have any doubts. Okay, seems everything is clear, Payal. We can move ahead.
Sure, Gunjan. So we'll have again, I mean, post all of our session, we'll have the Ask Me Anything session there as well. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to let us know. So I'll hand off to Sunil for his demo there. Sunil, over to you.
Thank you, Payal. Can you just open the slide, please?
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah,
Okay, great. So now we came to talk about second Azure service. You may think of using this service, right? Because Payal demonstrated like in a web application, you may be using the images, right? So there are many such use cases. Now you all might be aware about, like we have a e-commerce applications. Everyone wants to buy the products online. So we have a product images. So where we can store those product images, we can think of using the Azure storage account. Now, what is the Azure storage account? Azure storage account is the storage for unstructured data. So what we have unstructured data, like we may have our images, video files, audio files. So that's why given the example of, if we have any e-commerce web application, product images, any videos of that product, or maybe any OTT applications, right? We can store those audio, video, or maybe PDF or any data file in the storage account. So this is a storage for unstructured data. Very, very simple to understand this particular service, right? Now, the question is that we got to know the scenario, right? So how the storage account to be created, what all the things that is required here. So the very first that you need to do is to create the Azure storage account, which is the administrative container, right? So administrative container in the sense, in the storage account, we may have multiple data services, like we have 4 data services inside a storage account, like blob, file, queue, and the table, right? And we will be concentrating on the container. So if you can see the image there, the very first thing that we need to do is to create a storage account. And once we create a storage account, inside that, we need to create a container. And in that container, we can upload our images, files, audio, video files, right? So those we can upload inside the container over there, right? So that's why the second step is to create the container inside the storage account. And the third step, if you can see, upload a file, right? Maybe image file. So we will upload a file, and then simply we want to view this file using a URL, right? I will show you the demo of all those things, and then finally we can set our required permissions, how we want to make this blob to be, whether to be publicly available for all or whether very specific privately. So we will talk about that as well, right? Now let me first talk about some more scenarios. Like Payal has given you, like you can develop or you can deploy your web applications in Azure Web App Service. You have another choice as well, another option as well, like you can use the Azure virtual machine. So you can deploy your front-end web applications anywhere, either Azure web app or either Azure virtual machine, but you are referring some images, and for that we are here to create the storage account and upload those images into the storage account. Now let me share my screen, and then we'll see that how we can create all those storage account and containers. So just give me a second. I'm sharing my screen. Can I have a quick confirmations that my screen is visible? Great. Yep. So now you see that I am in the portal.azure.com, right? So Payal shown you this particular, the first window whenever you do a login into the Azure cloud. Now we have to search for storage account, right? So as Payal shown you, either you can search here or you can click on create a resource. Let me search here and go for storage account. So here you see that we have this storage account, right? So let's click on to that storage account. And when I click on that storage account, you see I have several storage accounts that are available here. Let me create one storage account. So hit on create button. And once you hit on create button, this is how the window will open. And this is where you can configure for creating your storage account. Now let's start with the subscription and resource group. Already you all are aware about like billing boundary, and we have to group our resources, right? So my subscription is Azure Cloud Train, and let me create a resource group where I want to group the resources. Now you see that you may be working for a project and this may need multiple Azure resources, just like you may need Azure web app, you may need Azure virtual machine, you may need the storage account, and you may need the SQL database. You can combine all these resources under one, which is we call it as a resource group, right? So this is a container which will hold the related resources for our solution, for our project, for our application. Now let me create here as demo rgssm. This is how I'm creating a resource group, and I just want to make my storage account to be part of this resource group, right? Now, the next thing which is very important, we have to provide the storage account name, right? So let me just provide the storage account name as sample, let's say storage, let's say sample storage for WW0, right? WWI worldwide importer. So this is how I am giving a name to the storage account. This should be globally unique. Now you see that I'm not getting any kind of errors here, right? That means I can use this particular storage account name here. And then you can choose a region, right? So the Microsoft Azure cloud is available all around the world. So you can choose the storage account near to your web applications where it is deployed. If you have deployed your web applications, let's say in East US or maybe in South India, it will make a sense to create a storage account into the South India or the East US because of latency. You may get very fast responses between this application and the storage account. So let me choose the region by default, which is East US. Then we have performance, like if you choose a standard, then it has a support for general purpose V2 account, right? And if you use a premium, right, whenever we have some scenarios where you need very low latency, right? So we need very fast, right? That time you can go for a premium, and obviously the pricing will be the different there. Now Let me just click on review because we have lot many options for creating a storage account, right? So let me just click on review. And when I click on review, this will first do a validations. It will check whether all the required configurations are configured or not. And if you don't get any kind of error, that means it's okay. And simply you have to click on create button. And when you click on create button, right, this is what the first step to create a storage account. Now we all know the second step. Inside a storage account, we need to create a container, and that container is where basically we can talk about the images of very specific project. Maybe for e-commerce application like this, we can create a container, or maybe for OTT applications, we can create that container. So let me just wait for one more minute, and then once this storage account is created, we can go inside that and we'll create a container there, right? So give me a moment. Yes, now you can see that the storage account is created. Let me click on go to resource, right? And I'm inside the storage account. So this is how the storage account will look like. Very simple. Now, when I come on the left hand side, you see there is a left pane, right? So you may see the left pane here. Just come down and you will see there is a section called as the data storage. So I was talking about these. Inside a storage account, we have 4 data services. Like we have a containers where we can store our unstructured data. Then we have our file sharing applications, queues, and the tables. But we are looking for the container because we can store unstructured data here in the container. Let me click on to the container. And when I click on container, right? So on the top here, you will see the plus container, where when I click onto that, you will be able to create a container. And then you can just give the name of the container. Maybe we can say like, hey, this is a container that I need for my e-commerce application, or maybe it is for our OTT application. I just want to give a name, and inside this particular container, I can upload my files, images, audio or video files, right? So this is how I am creating a container. So all the product images related to the e-commerce will come inside this container. And how you want to set the public access level? I want to make this particular container as a private, right? Because maybe this is very internal to my organization. So let me make it as a private here, and let me click on create button. And when I click on create button, right? So within a second, you will see the container created. Now let me go inside a container. Now when I go inside a container, on the top, you will see there is something called as upload. And this is the option where you can upload the images, right? Now this is one of the manual way to upload images. Directly you can upload the images from your laptop to here by using some command line codes, right? You can directly upload the images here as well. Now let me click on upload button, and when I click on upload button, right, so this is where it is asking me to drag and drop the file share. So let me just click on browse for files. And when I go to the browse for files, let me just go and to the very specific the files that we have here, right? So yeah, so this is how I have a file. Let me check if if it can open. Let me, right? So let me upload it, right? So you see that I have uploaded a blob here, right? I have uploaded a blob here. And if I just come here, right? So this is how the blob or the file which we have uploaded inside a container. Now we will get the URL. So each and every blob or object which you upload will get the URL, right? So you see, this is a URL which I can reference from the web browser. Let me just copy this, and let me just come here and paste it here. And now you can see that I'm getting some errors there. So anyone wants to figure out that why I'm getting this error, that it is saying like specified resource does not exist? What do you think about? Where did I do a mistake there? Anyone wants to talk about why it's not showing that image there? It should show that Windows XP image, but it's not showing that. Any reason behind this? Anyone?
Because you should be kept in private mode.
Yes, right. So we kept our container in the private mode, right? It's not, we have not enabled for public access, right? So let me just go there and make it as a public access, and let's come back and see. Okay. Now let me go back to the container here, right? And then when I go to the container on the top, you see there is something called as a change access level. Let me just click onto this and then let me change it to blob. So when I choose a blob, right? So this is like anonymous access to our images, right? Let me just click on OK. And this is how it is changing the permission. And let me just come here and let me just refresh it, right? So when I refresh, you see there is a file downloaded automatically, right? So this is not an image file, but this is a file. But if you upload an image, you will be able to see the Windows XP image here, right? But you see this is now downloaded a file. Now why it has downloaded a file? Because now this particular blob or object is available for everyone, right? So if you have a PDF file, it will open. If you have an audio, video file, it will open. Or if you have any images or any file, it get automatically downloaded based on the file. If it is an image, it will show you here, right? So this is what we have for storage account. Now, as I told you, you may have two scenarios like in every web applications, right? We need two tier, front end and the back end, right? So we can think about the front end as our web app where we can deploy our web applications, or we can think of using the virtual machine where we can host the web application, right? Now, as a backend, we can think about using some SQL database, relational database. We need some data we want to store in the form of rows and columns, right? So we need some relational database for that. And then this is the storage account where which will support for our product images. Now you might be interested for SQL database, that hey, how we can create the SQL database, how we can connect with the SQL database, how we can use. Now this is what our next section that we have. Now I just hand over session to Alok to continue. Thank you.
Thank
And
you,
if you are
Sunil.
having any
Thank you.
questions, definitely we will take. You can just let me know any questions if any one of you are having it.
I'm sure they would love to learn more about it because these demos make it a lot more interesting, Sunil.
Yeah,
Thank you
great.
for that. All right, folks. So what you saw, what Sunil was explaining was, let's say you're dealing with a shopping website, then you will have a lot of images or similar files which you would love to store, and that's why you need a storage account. That's one part of it. Let's say you come and do a transaction, right? Not on a shopping website, anywhere. Like you go to any store to do a transaction, right? Now this transactional data will be structured. Okay. Now what do I mean by structured? That is, let's take a simple example. Your transaction will come with an ID, right? A billing number, something on those lines. It will come with a list of items which you bought. Every item will have a cost price associated with it, some discount which you got, some final price, right? So whatever transaction I am doing will be similar to the transaction which you might do, correct? And every transaction will have the same attributes in terms of what? Transaction ID, product details, the cost, the discount, the final cost, and so on. Those are attributes. So every transaction will have similar attributes which can be stored. Now, even before I go to a database and speak about it, all of us would have opened up an Excel worksheet, right? At some point, all of us would have worked in Excel workbooks. Think of your database as an Excel workbook. On your top row, let's say you have the names of these attributes, right? So let's say you have order number, and then you have the billing type, let's say card, cash, Google Pay, whatever. And then you have the product detail, and then you have the discount. So there are multiple columns, right? And every column is an attribute for the transaction, color of the product you bought, and so on. And then every record is a transaction in it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is data can be represented in a tabular format, right? So there could be data which is not represented in a tabular format. Let's say more like whatever on a social media post, there are a lot of comments coming in, right? You do not want to store it as a tabular format. So in that case, you might use Azure storage, right? Or other databases are there which are NoSQL, but let's say you store files in Azure storage for one use case. But in many examples, the data can be stored in a tabular format. Okay, so in that tabular format, you come up with something called as a database. Okay, database, basically it's a collection of information in a tabular format. For now, we'll just stick to that definition of it. All right. So what I'll do now, I'll try to explain you what this database is exactly when you come to Azure SQL, sorry, Azure offerings. Okay. I'll take an example of a database. I'll show how the connection can be done from my local machine to something in Azure Portal. You're aware of it, right? What we are building, whatever services Payal and Sunil have been discussing, those are in the Azure Portal, right? So those are in the cloud environment. At some point, I want to connect them from some tool which is installed on my laptop, let's say. Okay, so from locally, I need to connect to the cloud environment. We'll try to build that sort of connection and then we'll see how things go from there. All right. Now, having said that, I'll quickly share my screen and I'll show you a few things around. But at any point, if you have a question or something, feel free to stop me and just right away go ahead and ask your question. We'll make it easier for all of us. Okay. So what you see, let me just go to the home page. Okay. So what you see here right now on your screen, it's my Azure portal. All of you would have, in some form connected to this at some point and got a look and feel of it already. Now, there's a great search bar here. Why do you need a search bar? See, even we have been working with Microsoft for so long, but Microsoft has so many offerings that at some point I might forget the exact name of it. Let's say that could be a case. Or it's just easier to go ahead and search for something, an offering, right? So let me say all I remember is I need a SQL database to work with. Right? So I decide that I'm going to store my data in a database and I need a SQL database. So what I do, SQL is structured query language. I'm sure you are aware of it. What I do, I go ahead and type SQL database and what do I see? I see quite a few offerings around it. Okay. Right? So services, I have a few services, then I have a see all option because there are many services which resemble that name of SQL database. And then there is documentation. If you want to read and learn more about it, there is a lot of documentation around it in the portal itself. So you can leverage it. For now, let's say I'll go ahead and I'll create a SQL database. Now think about it. A database can exist in many forms. Just to give you a high level overview of it, I can create a machine, a Windows machine, a virtual machine, and I can install SQL Server inside it as a tool, and I can host a SQL Server database within it, right? So I'll have the control on the virtual machine, right? Along with whatever I'm installing on that virtual machine. Your efforts of maintenance increases. Although you have better control, you have control at the virtual machine level, but the maintenance you have to do that increases. So right now the world is, inclining towards using platform as a service, let's say, or, some solutions, some services which are already up and running kind of, just consume them. Why? Because you have to focus on your business, right? You do not want to focus on maintaining hardwares and also leave that to Microsoft. So keeping that in mind, what I'll do, I'll pull up a SQL database. Now we'll talk about it. For a SQL database to exist, you need a virtual server or something. We'll talk about all of that. So what do? I just click on the first thing, which is a SQL database. Very simple. I just want you to follow with me. Now I have a couple of SQL databases already, but forget about them. We'll create a new one. Okay. So I go to create. Okay. When I create, it will launch all the options which I need to select or decide on before I create a SQL database, right? We'll talk about most of these options one by one. Now, subscription, as Payal was saying, it mainly takes care of your billing. So I have a few subscriptions around, but let's say I'll just select this one. Okay. Now, resource group is basically, many ways of explaining it. I just say it's more like an umbrella wherein all your resources. Now, Payal explained a couple of resources. Sunil explained a couple of them. I'll explain a few of them. Now, you want all these resources to lie under one umbrella, let's say, right? So resource group is more like a group of resources. You tag them together. You keep them under one resource group, right? So if you have a business environment, then let's say you will have one resource group which only deals with production machines or production services, right? Which are live, which are more of a customer facing and so on. You might have another resource group which talks only about the development services, right? So the services which you're using for testing your new features and all, that is under one resource group. So usually people try to segregate their services across resource groups in terms of production, UAT, and dev, but you can have different logics. You have machines which cater to HR requirements. You can have one resource group for that. You have machines which are catering to finance requirement. You can have one resource group. Depends how do you want to, what convention you need to follow when you're maintaining these resource group, but at least follow some convention. Okay, so let's say this is one of the few resource groups I have. So I'll just select this one. Now, when I come to, so this is just about where the database will lie, right? In terms of the subscription and the resource group. Now, let's say as the next step, I want to talk about the database name. Every database should have a name, right? Even when you save an Excel file, you provide a name to it, correct? So that's what I'll do here. I'll provide it with a name. And let me just say, since this is Lighthouse, let me just provide Lighthouse 2 as the name. Okay. So these are some criteria which the name has to match. The green ticks which you see right now. Database should not match special patterns. The value should be greater than has a length of at most 128. It can't go beyond it. It should not contain reversed words, and database with the same name should not exist. So let's say if I just remove this 2 here, it gives me an error. Why? Because I already have a database by the name of Lighthouse. So two databases similar, right? Two Excel files with the same name can't exist in the same location, right? So that's what it is telling. I need to have a different name. So I put in a different name. Now coming on to the server part, I'll just hover on this because it will bring up a readable part there. But think of it, here we are not creating a physical server. It's more like a logical server which you're creating, right? For your databases to reside together. So on one server, you can create multiple databases, right? So here you're more of creating a logical server. So Azure takes care of it in the backend, but here you just need to define which logical server you want. Now I already have a logical server here, Power BI sample. I'll use that. Okay. But in case you want to go ahead and create a new one, you have the option here. So there is the server, and within that your database will reside. Now, since you're using this database as a service, right, you do not really control the server, but still you have to define a name for the server. That's what you're doing here, right? So if you're not happy, you go ahead, you say, I'll create a new server, okay? And then you put the name and where do you want to host it. Now, location is very tricky, okay? Why? Because there could be compliance policies around. Now, your business would say that, hey, I do not want my data to go out of India or out of a certain region. One of the examples why you will select a very specific, location. Second, as Sunil was saying, it could be a problem with latency, right? So you're reading the data from India and your data is hosted in US, and there could be some latency versus when the data is hosted in India and you're reading it from India. At the same time, there could be services which are not present in a specific location. They are yet to come up in that location, right? So just be aware of what location you're choosing. Don't go ahead and just select it at random. Okay. Be mindful of it. Have some logical explanation why you're going ahead and selecting, let's say, East US and why you're not selecting India and so on. Just have some explanation around it. Okay. For now, I'll just select East US. All right. So then I have authentication modes. When you create an Excel file, right? And I can double click and open it up. You do not want that to happen. Then what do? You put in a password over there. So when I double click, it pops up saying that, hey, this file is password protected. Please punch in the password and it will open up, right? Similarly, for my database, I do not want everyone to access my database. So what do I do? At the server level, now you make sure this is not the database, okay? This is create SQL database server. You're creating that logical server, which I was explaining you. So at the server level, you can select what authentication mode you want. All right. It comes in different modes, basically. How do you want to authenticate? Simply put, it could be a simple username and password, which is what we call a SQL Server authentication. Okay, so there'll be a username, there'll be a password given, and you can log in and get the data what you want. Or there are a few other ways also. It could use your Azure Active Directory, right? So basically your usernames and password which are already given to you using Active Directory, even those can be used to authenticate your your when you log in onto a database, right? What I'll do for now, let's say I'll select authentication SQL, then it will ask me for a login, a password, and confirming the password. Okay, those things you'll put here. If I put all of these details and I click on OK, that will create a new logical server. All right. In this case, let's say I do not want to create a new logical server. I'll use the one which I'm already having. So I'll just go back. I'll just discard whatever changes I had. I'll go back to creating, and let's say the database name which I had, Lighthouse 2, and I'm using the same server which I already have. All right. Now, I'll not go into what is Elastic Pool, just to give you a very high level picture of it. What is SQL Elastic Pool? At a very high level, you create a pool of resources. Four things, let's say. You can have RAM, you can have network, you can have CPU, and you can have your hard drive. Right. So mainly these are the four pillars of infrastructure. Okay. So you create a pool of resources and you create multiple databases. These databases can share that CPU, all right, or share that memory based on which one needs more and which one needs less. Right now, we'll just say no, we don't want a sharing of resources to be done. We just want to create a standalone SQL Server database. So I'll select no here. Now this part is really important. This part is really, really important. So I hope you're in your screen right now, focusing as much as you could. Compute and storage. Basically, this is for what you pay. You pay for the computing power, CPUs and all. You pay for the computing power, plus you pay for the storage. How much of a storage you need and what should be the speed and other specifications of the storage. So here, if you go to configure database, and this new screen is really important. So just don't randomly select anything here because you see there is some cost involved. All right, so let's say if I go ahead and just select something very randomly and you see the cost now. So let me just select something really random. You see the cost. This could be the per month cost. Okay, about 50 lakh for one database. So don't do a mistake while you're selecting it, right? Make sure you're checking this cost. Make sure you're selecting what you want to select. Now, when I click on this service tier drop down, there are two models for purchasing it. You can select it in the vCore model, which talks about the CPU and all. Rather than that, the easier one is the DTU based purchasing model. DTU based is more like the processing power. Simply said, I don't want to care about the CPUs and RAM and everything. I just want a certain processing power. Can you give me that? Database transaction units, basically. So if I go for basic, because I just want to simply show you how it works, right? So I'll go for basic. Now, if I change it to basic, you see the cost, how much it is? It's less than 400 rupees a month. Okay. Now in basic, I'm at the maximum limit, but you can go ahead and say, okay, I need standard wherein I need more computing power. Okay. So the basic had a, very max data size was only 2 gigabytes. But if you go to standard, then you can increase this database size to around 1 terabytes. All right. And the DTUs can be 3000 DTUs. So what do we do usually? Now, see, this is a cloud environment, right? I do not need to commit something on the infrastructure right away. I can spin up a comparatively small database, right? And depending on my usage, I can always scale up. right? I can always provision more resources for my database. And that is important. That's how you leverage the capabilities of cloud environment, right? So you might select something in between to start with, let's say around 50 DTUs and, you know, let's say around a 50 GB of size. That's how you start with. But after a point, you increase it, you scale up, which is pretty easy in the cloud environment. So once you have selected what you want to select here, right? Either you go for premium now. See, when you talk about premium, it is for IO intensive input output disk. Basically, it's saying that disk. The disk is much more faster when you go for premium, but the cost will again be more, right? So the cost, you see, the cost changes pretty fast. So the cost is again more if you select premium. So make sure you're selecting, a service tier which caters to your requirement. At the same time, it is affordable for your cost. For now, I'll just select, this one, and let me click on apply. So this compute and storage changes the moment I select what I need to select. All right. And then how do you want to store the backups and all? We'll not go into this. We'll just keep locally and we'll keep it here. Then there are tabs which talk about networking, which IP addresses you want to allow. Remember, you're going to log in, let's say from your desktop, from your machine into a cloud environment, right? So at some point you have to tell that, hey, look, cloud, I'll send a connection from this IP, okay? And you have to accept that connection, right? Otherwise, there are thousands of people who can send a connection to a server name, right? So you have to tell them that only when you receive a connection from this certain IP or a subnet IP group, only then accept it. So, you'll just select those things. I'll tell you how to select all of that. But yeah, here are the options basically in networking. And then if you want to use Microsoft Defender, we won't talk about it. But yeah, there are settings for various other things to do. Okay. Now, just for folks who will try this at some point. Now, how do you want to create the database? Do you want to start with a blank database? When I talk about a database, then you simply think about an Excel file. Will be easy to understand. Should I start with a blank Excel file or should I start with a template Excel file? Right? Or should I start with an Excel file which already has some data in those lines, right? So here I have some options, right? You can, if I want to start with a blank database, right? So I can say none. Use existing data, none. Or I can start with a sample. So the sample is AdventureWorks database here. So I can say, okay, and I can start with a sample. Or if I have a database copy already, the copy is what we call as backup, right? So you took the Excel file, you shared with someone in a pen drive, and now the other person has it. Similarly, I have my database. I took a backup of it. I took a copy of it, right? And now I want that database as a starting point for a new database. Okay, so then I'll say, no, start it from a backup. So then I have the options to select where my backups are and so on. Okay, right now, let me just select none, if that's all right. Or let me just select sample because I'll show you a few things inside a database. So let me just select sample. So I took this sample database, all right? Now, because it's a sample database, collation I won't be changing. Collation is basically the type of data. So let's say you want to keep it case sensitive. Capital A and small a should be treated differently. How do you tell this to database, right? So that's how you tell it using collation. There are other things of it. In polished characters, you have an accent at the top, right? So how do you tell that A with an accent and a simple A are different? You tell it by selecting the right collation. We won't go into depth of it, but just remember this is something you will use. All right, so I'll just say review and create here. Okay, so it is simple. It gives me a summary screen. It tells me, all right, look, this is your cost. And these are the basics. You might want to take, not right now, but when you're doing it for yourself, you might want to take a screenshot of this page, although you can access it within the portal at many places. But yeah, just a screenshot, a quick reference point helps, right? So I remember the subscription where I'm making it. I remember the resource group, the region, the name of my database, the server. The server is really important. Okay, so remember the server and the database. What compute and storage capacity I have mentioned, and backups, and then other things. Okay, so all right. Now let me just click on create. What will create do? Create will start building that service, whatever I selected. So Payal and Sunil did it in the same way. Let's click on create. It will take a minute, to build it. But here at the top, if you see, there's that notification bell icon, let's say. So when you click there, it has a lot of other things here, the activities which I have done earlier. So it's all there. Okay. So now it is creating my database. Just remember, it took a sample database, right? It didn't build a blank one. It took a sample database. So you're making an Excel file with already existing Excel file. Let's say that. Right. So now what we'll do, it might take a minute to, just deploy it. While it is deploying, we'll definitely wait for it to deploy. But while it is deploying, I'll try to show you a few things on the database, which I already have. Okay. All right. Any questions up till this point? Anybody? Feel free to get off mute and talk, or you can put it in chat. And your questions could be really, really simple, and I'm really happy. So, go ahead and ask me your questions. Okay. All right. If you have anything, just put in chat. If you're shy of getting on the mic or something, just put it in chat. If there's something in chat, I'll just check it right away and answer it. Okay. So I think what I'll do, I'll go back to, show you with how the previous. All right. So this deployment is done, right? You see at the notification at the top, it says your deployment has succeeded now. Now the next step comes in that my resource is created, right? My resources. Next step is I need to connect to it, right? So let's see how it works. Let me go to home. Okay. This is what I created, right? Lighthouse 2. That's what I created. Now, if you look at the bracket part, it says the server name and the database name. Let me just click on it. So it opens up that whole dashboard for me. All right. And then it has a lot of options here. I'll let you go ahead and explore it at some point. Now, when I'm into connecting the database from my local environment, I really want to have the connection strings, which you see here, right? So let me go to that connection string. And this is the whole connection string. So whatever applications you're creating, as Payal was explaining, at some point you will need to put a connection string in the application, right? So that's where you get your connection strings. What I'll do, I'll also share a tool with you, which is a very simple one, Management Studio, what we call as. There you go. I already have it open. So now this tool is running on my local environment. All right. And now I'm trying to connect to the database in the cloud. Last part of it should take another couple of minutes. Let's say I click on connect. So, you'll get used to this tool. Most of you would have seen this. If you haven't, then, you'll just get up. This is called as the SQL Server Management Studio 2. Okay. Here you go ahead and if you click on this drop down, it says there's a database engine, which is what you want to connect to. So that's what we do here. And this is my server name. Remember, this is not the database name. The database is within the server, right? So here you're going to put your server name. All right. So this is the server which I which I had already. Let me just try to do it now. Dimension. Yep. And so this is the connection string basically, right? So it's Power BI sample database windows.net. Okay. So that's what it is here, right? Power BI sample database windows.net. And then I selected this mode, SQL Server authentication mode, just a username and password, and it runs pretty fast. So let me click on connect. Might ask you to whitelist your IP if it isn't there already. What I had done before, before starting this, I had, set up a firewall rule and my IP, my local IP and stuff are added here, and they're allowed. In your case, if those are not allowed, you just need to add a firewall rule and starting IP and ending IP. There it is. Just add the name and, you're done. Okay. So coming back here, once it is connected, I'll expand. Now I'm expanding the server. The server within has a few databases. Okay. So there you go. I just created a Lighthouse 2 on the server, right? In the portal, and I'm able to connect it. Now, if I expand this, now it's no more your Excel file, all right? Now you're coming to the real thing. So now, forget your Excel file and come back to the database link. now I have so many things within a database, right? Tables are where we'll just focus another 2 minutes maybe. Uh, it will take a while to respond because it's querying the cloud and getting the data from you. So it might just take. So these are your different tables. Now, in an Excel file, you have multiple sheets, correct? So think of each table as a different sheet. Just trying to correlate, not the very perfect way to think of it, but if you're coming in from that background of Excel, so remember this, a database can be an Excel file, or Excel workbook, and every table could be a sheet within it, right? Now, if you just come here and let's say customers, right? So if I right click on it, I can write a query always, but just say select top 1,000 rows. Let's just have a quick look at the data, what can be stored inside. Because the whole discussion started with that, right? That you have customers who are doing that online transactions or who are doing that offline transactions, and they're storing some data, attributes, right? So now what you see in front of your screen is attributes, correct? So now I just ran a query for the customers, and now you can see tons of customers, right? And these are all at the top row. If you see, these are all attributes, right? The customer ID, name, first name, middle name, last name, and so many other things, right? So that's how it all works, right? So it's all there. This UI gives me the ability to read through the data, analyze the data, right? So if I really want to go ahead and check at some point that how is my business doing, right? What products are my customers buying? Right? What stocks should I keep and what stocks are irrelevant for my business, right? All of that analysis can be done only when I have a lot of data to analyze, right? If I want to understand their shopping behavior, if I want to understand their, how much is the regular order size, right? What kind of discounts they are looking for. There could be so many business questions, right? So all of these business questions, if you want to answer them, you need to have the data, right? Which you have right in front of you right now. So this data, you go ahead and analyze and query the data, maintain it for compliance reasons, build reports on top of it for compliance reasons and all. So a lot can be done on top of data, which you all know. So that's about it. What we did, a quick recap. We made a SQL Server database in cloud, in Azure Cloud. We used the existing server which we had, the Power BI sample server, but we also learned how you can build a new server, okay, with providing the username and login. There are multiple methods of logging in. We saw that. The main thing which I want you to remember is the compute and storage selection, because that's where you might end up spending a lot more than what you need. So remember, there are multiple options, premium and basic, so standard. So make sure you're selecting what you need. All right. And then once our database was created, we went to connection string. We picked up that connection string and we connected using this wonderful tool. This is called as SQL Server Management Studio, because you do all the management things from here. Right? So this is the management studio. You connect to your database from here. You can manage and maintain your databases from here. A lot of things can be done, backups and restores and building indexes. There are tons of things you can do from the management studio. Forget about all that. For us, let's just remember, I can have a look at my data from the management studio. All right. So that's pretty much what I had for all of you. Here, people might not be using SQL databases, let's say. You can have multiple other types of databases, right? There could be Cosmos DB, there could be Oracle. There are multiple flavors of databases. SQL is what I took as an example here. But yeah, you could use any other databases here. Once you decide on what project you're doing, definitely you can come back to us and we'll answer what kind of database suits your requirement, right? It's not always that a relational database or a tabular database will be the best for your requirement. You could go ahead and you'll say, hey, look, my data is not in tabular format. I'm just researching comments which I have on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere. So I do not want to store my comments like this in a tabular format. So do you have any other better option? Maybe I'll say, oh, then why not evaluate JSON files? So there are very, very optimized solutions for the requirements. All right, this is, one of the general things which, one of the general things which I could share with you. But at the same time, once you are ready with what you want to build, come back to us and, we'll be happy to guide you that what is the optimum solution for you. All right. So with that, I'm good. If you have any questions, good time to ask me now, or definitely you can connect with me on LinkedIn or wherever, and, you can shoot your questions to me there. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Payal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you, Alok, and Payal and Sunil as well. My request is for students who have any questions, you can either paste it in the chat or if you could raise your hands, and we'll call you for you to unmute to ask the question. So yes, we have one question from Narmada. If you could please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Ma'am, I didn't have a question, but I missed the first 20 minutes of demo session. Can you please give a gist of those topics covered in those 20 minutes, in the first 20 minutes, ma'am?
Payal, do you want to?
Yeah. Namrata, did you watch the demo for the web apps or did you miss that demo for web apps?
I missed those demo for web apps, ma'am.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, ma'am.
Sure. So we have it recorded, so you will be able to kind of see the recording for that. But I'll quickly tell you what we were talking about from the web apps perspective. Basically, we were able to create a web app using the service there. And we also said that when you create a web app, you have to make sure that you have an app service plan associated with it. Okay, so that's what we were kind of talking about. I'll just quickly show you what we kind of did, but you can definitely refer back to the the recording as well. Just show this. Yeah, if you're able to see the screen, what we did was we just created this web app here named Lighthouse. And what we did is once you deploy, after you have selected all the settings, if you have deployed it, you get this URL for the website. Right now, when you click on this URL, you'll get this default URL. Once you have, I mean, if you click on the default web page, you get this default website which says that your app is running and waiting for your content. So you get this created. So this is making use of only one service. Now, if you want to make use of another service, what you can do is you can play around with the storage account, upload a file in this from the storage account. You can use that file in your website, or you can connect your web app to a database and connect data with that as well, right? So that will make use of two services there. Okay. So what I did was I use the web app only, and I made use of this deployment tools in which I have this app editor. So this app editor gives you this visual representation of your website, right? So it gives you the HTML version of your website. You can play around with this. Maybe you can change the image, upload the image in a storage account and give that link there. Okay, so I created one similar one like this. Like I just modified the same default website only and just modified the image and the text in that website, and I created this modified one. This made use of two services there. One was your website, web apps, and other was your storage account, because this file is uploaded in the storage account there. Okay, does that help?
Yes, ma'am, I got it.
Cool.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
is recording be available through the mail?
Yes,
I
so
think
Narmada, we will be sending out the recordings to all future Ready Talent students via email. So you can stay tuned for that.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
No problem. Are there any other questions that any other students have? Feel free to raise your hands and I'll call you so you can unmute yourself. Yes, we have a question from Ashish. Ashish, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please. Ashish, are you able to hear us? If you're more comfortable with asking the question via chat, feel free to also ask your question in the chat and we'll answer it for you.
yeah, good evening.
Good evening, Ashish. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had not received any mail regarding the free tiers of the Google Azure account.
Sorry, could you just repeat that, please?
I had not received a mail regarding the free tier account.
So, Ashish, are you talking about your GitHub Student Developer Pack account? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am.
So for that, you need to complete your orientation profile on the Future Ready Talent page. And then after that, an email will automatically be triggered to your email with the link to the GitHub Student Developer Pack.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
I know from the future ready perspective, future ready talent perspective, we have a mix of students from different backgrounds. So hope me, Alok, and Sunil were able to, kind of give our explanation so that you could understand how to go ahead of it, right? I know for someone who is not from this background, it might be a little difficult, but this is a starting point. So you can see these demos, kind of refer back to these demos. We will also be sharing. We have shared a couple of links as well, so there are a lot of tutorials available in the MS Learn, which you can go through and build your projects on that. So like website which I showed, and Sunil showed the storage account, and Alok explained in detail the SQL database as well, right? So you can use these components to build your project there, right? And again, just to give a heads up, as a student developer pack, the one which Nuray was talking about, you have $100 credited there. So in case you're testing for any purposes or anything that you're doing, right, which you know is just for the testing purpose, after you're done the testing, go ahead and delete it or disable those resources, because that will consume your subscription. Okay. Now, if there are no questions, we'll start asking questions then. Right? Okay. So what does a subscription do? Is it for billing purpose or is it just for your profile? The subscription that we are talking about. Is it for billing or is it just we gave you a student profile there when you
Student,
created the Yeah, go ahead, Ashish. Go ahead.
student profile.
Okay. But if you are going to create any resource, let's say you create a SQL database, right? So there'll be a charge associated with it, right? Where will that charge come up or where will that cost come up?
After completing the 100, then they will be charging on the database.
Yeah. So that cost, whenever you get the resource, no, it'll be charged to your subscription only. So that $100 which is given as a developer pack is actually associated with your subscription. So each service that you're going to consume, right, it'll be billed to your subscription there. Okay. Now, when we all created a resource, no, the database or the web app or the storage account, all of us created one thing common, no? What was that common thing which grouped all our resources? What was that called?
Resource ma'am.
Yeah, Namrata, go ahead and tell that. What was it?
Resource group.
Yes, it was a resource group. Yes. So that is mandatory. You will have to mention a resource group. You will have to mention a subscription. A unique name has to be given. So these three things will be common. So once you have given all the mandatory settings, like I said, for web app, go for the free tier. And also if you're going for any other services, check for the one which is minimum cost there, right? So that you can complete your project within that credits which are provided to you. Okay. Yeah, Narmada, you have a question for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, project is about building a static web app. Which should I opt to? Whether I have to opt to Azure web app or I should opt to Azure virtual machine instance.
So it's a web app, no? So what you do is you create it from your Azure web app itself. So another option is that if you create a virtual machine, in that if you install IIS, that will also have a website there. And so there's another way of doing it in a virtual machine. When you deploy, you'll have to install the IIS component. Okay, in that also you'll get a default website. That is one way. But you can go with this web app service. Here you can you don't have to just write with .NET. You can have other languages also that you can use. Other runtime stack also can be incorporated when you go with a web app stack. It's easier also. It's up to you.
Okay.
I mean, the web app one is easier. That's why I showed it. But you can go with a virtual machine, install IIS as well. But that will become just one service, right? So you'll have to have another service also.
If
Okay,
I
ma'am.
can add more to this question.
Sure, sure,
So
Sunil.
as you see that Azure Virtual Machine is a infrastructure as a service. So lot of the things that you need to take care about. But if you move to the Azure Web App Service where it's a platform as a service, so you don't have to worry about underlying infrastructures, right? So for Azure Virtual Machine, you need to create a virtual machine. You need to install the runtime environment, like you need a PHP, right? So whatever you need to install it there. But this is not the case with the Azure Web App, right? So you just come here, you choose which language you want, right? You have your web applications available, you are deployed. That's it. You are not worrying about anything, right? So this is how you get the benefits of using Azure Web App as a platform as a service. I hope that this explanations makes more sense, right?
Yes, sir. I got
Yeah.
it.
Any other questions that we have?
Okay. I think if there are no other questions, Payal, Sunil, and Alok, then we can also close this session.
Sure.
So students, we will also be sending you a recording of this session, so you will be able to listen to it later. And if you have any questions following listening of the recording, we'll be happy to answer those questions then as well.
Sure.
So
And we'll be happy to hear the feedback also. So if you have any suggestions or feedback for us, do feel free to put it up on the chat. So in the next iteration of this, we can incorporate your feedbacks as well. So please feel free to share your feedbacks on the demos, on the training, on the explanation that we provided. If something needs to be more simplified, or you need some more information on it, we'll be happy to contribute on the same. So feel free to use the chat option to share your feedback.
perfect. Thank you so much, Payal and Sunil and Alok. I think it was a very informative session. So I think all the students' questions have kind of already gotten answered, which is why there are less questions back to you. But students, as Payal mentioned, if there are any feedbacks or suggestions that you have for our presenters, please do post it on our chat. So we do want to make this as interactive, as informative as it can be for our future ready talent students. So please let us know if there's any feedback or anything. But thank you so much. Thank you, students, for joining in. And thank you, Alok, Payal, and Sunil as well for your presentations.
Thank
Thank you so
you,
much.
Thank
Nuria.
you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you. Bye
Have a
bye.
great
Bye. Have
day
a great
ahead,
evening.
everyone. Bye bye.